All right. Good morning. Welcome to another week and another Liberty Dad podcast episode. Thank you for tuning in live. If you are tuning in, I just want to say that up front. Especially, for those folks who get up early to get here at 7:30 in the morning and watch a show where I just go on and talk. Like I really appreciate it. And you might like that's that I'm deviating from my normal introduction a little bit. And I'm doing it on purpose because I woke up late today and I am so behind on things. It's insane. It's funny. Um, so I woke up this morning and my wife was getting ready to go to she was getting ready to go to the gym. And I thought, yeah, my alarm will go off here in a few minutes. It didn't click that my alarm is supposed to go off before she gets up. And so then I laid there, and the next thing I knew, it was like almost 7 o'clock. And I was like, what? So I jump up and I'm scrambling to get my son awake. And I go to run downstairs. Now, luckily, I prepared for this show pretty much mostly last night. So I didn't have a lot to do this morning. So I was able to actually pull this all off. So we're in good shape today, folks. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know, like, hey, this is kind of like a rolling conversation here. We're not all business. Tell you a little bit about what's going on with my life. We can connect and whatnot. Because I'm sure that some of you out there had to be somewhere, had something to do in the morning, once upon a time somewhere, and you woke up a little bit late, and then you were scrambling. Well, sometimes that happens here. So that's where we are today. Anyway, do me a favor, folks. If you enjoy the show, I want you to be sure to like and subscribe to the show. For the really serious folks out there, you know what? Do me a favor. Go out, find that bell, smash it. That way you never miss an episode. All right, today we are going to do a bill review. I haven't done a formal bill review in quite some time where I just go out and I like download I go and look up a bill, like a local bill, a state level bill, a federal level bill. Today we're going to be looking at a Senate bill, and I think it'll be kind of interesting. But before I get into that, I want to show you something. I saw this on Twitter the other day, and this drives me crazy. So we're having this conversation right now about Daniel Penny. Now, if you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, Daniel, or you just maybe are, doing things with your own life and not really sitting on the edge of your seat looking at, waiting for the next news story to pop up. Daniel Penny was on a subway, and there was a man that got on the subway, and he was a regular homeless man, so people were familiar with him. But he got on one day and he started intimidating and talking really crazy, intimidating the passengers. And so Daniel Penny put him in a chokehold of some sort, was like, hey, look, you need to calm down, calm down. A couple other passengers sort of assisted as well. And unfortunately, the man ended up dying. And so Daniel Penny is now, he is, he got arrested and, was going through court and all that. But, and it's not that I don't really want to talk about Daniel Penny's story so much, but this was a tweet that I saw, and it said outside the courthouse, BLM activists are giving lengthy, unengaged monologues to the press. And then he quotes some of what they say. Now, I'm not going to play that video because I think there's a more important video to talk about. But he quotes them, and they're saying things like, would Daniel Penny be a hero if Jordan Neely, the man he choked, was white? No. Then they go on and they say, black people don't mean anything to white Americans. And then he says, then the tweet says, BLM activist as the Penny trial breaks for lunch on day 4. So these BLM activists were outside of the courthouse, and they were basically saying things like, you know what? White people don't care about black people. And, we still have this huge racial divide. And I retweeted that with a video from like years ago of it. It was a funny video because, it was a news story about a man. He was a black man, and he saw two old white people being mugged, basically. They left the bank, and some dude, and I don't even like, they didn't even tell the skin color of the perpetrator, but apparently this perpetrator went and assaulted these two old people and then tried to run away. And this black guy ran after them and tackled them and held them down. And then a couple of other black guys came and helped them out as well, and then held this perpetrator down until the police got there. And they were like, "Yeah, this guy's a hero." And I'm like, "Why don't you talk about those kind of stories? If you're concerned that white people just don't care about black people, then maybe you show stories of black people doing things that like any reasonable white person could say, man, that's pretty awesome. I like that. Right? Like, why not highlight, amazing black people? I mean, you don't have to wait for Black History Month. Just throwing that out there. Okay. So I'm not gonna wait. Now, I told you about that story, and that one was considerably older. This one was way better. Um, and not only was it way better, it was actually like 2019 or something. So it's kind of recent. Now, again, are there stories of black people doing really cool things that are like, last month? Yes. I didn't spend a whole lot of time digging into them, but I'm also not the one who's going out there and saying, boo hoo hoo, white people don't like black people, because I don't think it's true. I think white people in general, for the most part, like, I'm sure there's a few out there, but most of them are pretty cool with black people. So let's play this video, because this, like, you just got to see this. This is just crazy wild. So here we go.
A man scaling a 19-story burning building in Philadelphia with the hopes of reaching his mother trapped inside.
I'm not just going to sit there and let my mom die. I'd rather risk my life falling than let her sit in there and die.
Yeah, he's climbing all the way up the outside of the building.
Sometime after 9:30 p.m., Jermaine received a call from his sister saying his 65-year-old immobile mother couldn't make it out of her apartment on the 15th floor. Jermaine rushed to the scene, but police had blocked off the front door.
They said they was like, the elevator's not working. I'm like, no problem. I'll take the steps. I just want to go make sure my mother is sick. She bedridden. So I need to get up there.
But police wouldn't let Jermaine in. So despite having fractured his hip earlier that day, Jermaine let adrenaline take over, climbing the building's fenced-in balconies, wire cutters in hand.
I was going to cut a hole in the fence to next door and then, to let her go through.
The fire was contained by the time he reached his mother's floor. She reassured him from the balcony that she was okay, and back down he went.
Was she yelling at you because you climbed outside?
She was more shocked. She really not, she don't be surprised at things I do to her. She know I go over and beyond for her.
So back down he went, expecting a quick arrest once on the ground. But an understanding officer let him go.
So he actually did cut me a break because he understood the circumstances. He knew, when you're adrenaline pumping your mom up there, you thinking she dying, you do anything you can.
Okay. That's an amazing stuff. Like, I think I watched it twice because I was like, wait a minute, did this dude he not only climbed 19 stories on the side. I mean, this is not a professional rock climber. This isn't that guy, who like, I can't remember his name. Is he called Spider-Man or something? It's like there's like a real life Spider-Man guy. He's a climber. Like, that's what he does. And he climbs buildings. That's not one of these guys. Just a regular, everyday, average Joe. Right. And he was like, all right, my mom is stuck on upstairs. I'm going to go and help her out. The police are like, sorry, you can't get in the building. And he's like, well, I will just climb the building. And he did it with a busted hip. Like, how cool is that? And I tweeted that and I was like, look, more stories like this, please. More men like this. Like, if you're going to be, if you are, here's the thing. I'm deviating a little bit. We're going to get to that bill review. On social media, there seems to be these guys, like, I don't know if it's the red pill movement. I don't really know much about it, but there are these influencers that will talk trash about women. It's like the Andrew Tates of the world, blah, blah, blah. And they'll whine and boo-boo lip about, they can't get a date, all this other crazy stuff. And I'm like, just go out there and just be an awesome person. Just do whatever you can to be awesome. If your mom is sick, go help her. If there's a little old lady that needs help crossing the street, just help her. If you got to climb 19 stories to make sure your mom is okay, by golly, do that. Right? Like, more men like this, please. And not just black men, but just men in general. Like, this is a really, really awesome story. And it's amazing. Like, it's just like, how many men would say, off the cuff, that they would do something like that? I don't know, but we need to be inspired by other men. And if your concern is that we as a society don't value black people, then maybe, just spitballing here, maybe instead of highlighting and bringing attention to somebody who was arrested 42 times, including several times for assaulting women, instead of highlighting that guy because he died in a tragedy, and it's a tragedy. I don't think that Daniel Penny intended to kill him. But instead of highlighting that guy, why don't you highlight the Jermaines of the world who have done a good thing? Or the other guy, which I think in the news story, I think his name was like Shake or something like that. I don't know if it was Shake like as in, shake yourself, or, or like Shake as in more like chic. I don't really know how he spells his name. But, highlight these guys, the guys that are doing things that white people will be forced to appreciate. Like, highlight those guys. Or, okay, I get it. Maybe you believe that the Jordan Neelys of the world need a little of attention because maybe this guy went a little too far. Maybe it started out good. That's not where they are, but we can also go this route. You can say, okay, well, it started out okay, but he went too far. He should have let up, whatever. Okay, so maybe we need to bring attention to this particular story because it went too far, regardless of the intent. It went too far. Okay, fine. But again, why am I seeing these stories from random accounts that are out there just trying to get engagement? That's where I saw this story. I saw it from one of those accounts that just like, they just post these kind of videos and they're like, wow, check this out, and then everybody likes it. And, they presumably are getting paid on X, for making posts that get a lot of engagement. Like, cool, fine with that, like whatever. But why is it that I'm seeing these stories from that account instead of the BLM account? I mean, if you're so concerned about it, then show people the good stuff, the stuff that maybe mainstream media isn't blasting, or maybe that we just missed. Spend your time on that. But no, they want to just talk about, they want to wait, sit on their hands and wait until there's a tragedy and then cry about it. And then be like, well, white people don't like us. Well, I don't like you either. If you're not even going to highlight good things that people do, I don't like you either. So there, how about that? All right. I'm being a little fiery today. It's probably because I woke up late. And I'm like still in this disoriented state where I woke up and I was like, it's a little lighter in here than I'm expecting. Anyway, we should get to that bill review, huh? That was the wrong one.
I know I'll be a loss someday, at least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
All right, that's valid. I'm going to re-record that because he's a little bit bigger now, and I think I could do even a little bit better job. So we'll see. We'll see what I can come up with, but it'll be fun. So in fact, I'll tell you this. I will tell you this. The little. You remember from Schoolhouse Rock, the little Bill that was like, "Hi, I'm a Bill," blah, there's a costume for that. And I looked it up. I was like, I wonder, maybe I should wear a costume and I can be the Bill and like you can pretend to sign me or something. I don't know. I was trying to think of something clever. That costume is like $90. And I was like, I don't know if I like it that much. So, but I may try to find like a DIY or something. I don't know, but it was tempting. It was very, very tempting, but I don't want to pay $90 just so I could make a little clip that I show maybe once a week or something like that. Although, who knows? Maybe I'll do it anyway. We'll see. Let me know in the comments if you think like, dude, DL, you totally got to do that. We'll see. I might be willing to do that. But right now, I'm kind of like on the fence, leaning toward no. Anyway, let's get to this bill review. Okay. So this senator out of North Dakota, Senator Mike Rounds, he has presented a bill that will shut down the Department of Education. Now, look, I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I have been extremely critical of President-elect Trump because I don't trust him. I saw that he didn't come through on a lot of his promises or even try in his last term. So I'm not going to necessarily believe him this term. Like he used that, when he initially came out and he was like, I'm going to run for president. I'm brand new. I'm not beholden to all the bureaucracy and all that other stuff. I was like, all right, cool. Now I didn't vote for him, but I was like, all right, let's see what you do. Right. Well, I saw what he did and I wasn't impressed. So as far as I'm concerned, he's the run-of-the-mill politician, maybe a little bit better in some regards, but he's basically the run-of-the-mill politician. And so when he came out and he said, I'm going to end the Department of Education, I'm like, all right, he's just telling me what I want to hear. Like that's really all that we've got going on here. But that doesn't mean that I don't want the Department of Education to be ended. I think the single argument to make for ending the Department of Education is to ask people, how has education improved since its inception? And like nobody has an answer for that. Like, and I mean a specific, direct, they did this, then this happened, right? It's like if I were to say I bought a brand new house and then I built a fence and I cleaned up the vegetation and I personally painted the house. And somebody said, hey man, how is that property increased in value? How has it become better since you were the owner? I could say, well, here, look at this fence. This is a really nice looking fence. I cleaned up the yard. The vegetation was a bit out of control. So I took care of that. I did some nice landscaping. I repainted the house. Now it looks very beautiful on the outside. I could point to something specifically in that scenario. And so when it comes to the Department of Education, when people are saying, oh, we got to keep it, press at them and say, what has it specifically done that has improved education, right? Like specifically. And there isn't really an answer. Now, people might argue and say, well, we put down rules in place. But again, we have to look and say, it's a question of metrics. It's very simple. What was education like? What were like school scores? What was, what was like, say, the national average for literacy rates? What those kind of metrics. What were the metrics when it was, and I think it was in 1979. What were the metrics then? What are the metrics now? Like, how have they improved? Has literacy gone up? No, it hasn't. In fact, it's actually getting worse, right? Have math comprehension skills went up? No, they're down, right? Like we are not in a better place. So it is not performing. It's not to say that it's not doing anything. Like any entity does something. But the question is, what is it doing to contribute to the improvement of education? And the answer is really nothing. It's not doing anything. So here is Senator Mike Rounds. He is on the Neil Cavuto show on Fox News, and he's discussing his bill. Let's play it. Where do we go here? There you are.
You've been very conscious of some of this overspending that's been going on and the growth of the bureaucracy. And sure enough, there's a move afoot on the part of the incoming Trump administration to address that. But it's extended, really, if you think about it, Senator, to the size of cabinets. I was looking back at prior presidencies where back in JFK's time, for example, he could fit his entire cabinet right at that table. right? And now it's extended to chairs behind the big table. And as the cabinet gets bigger and bigger and bigger, now you've looked at the education department.
So I want you to stop and just think about that for just a second. Now, we are going to get into the education, but think about what he just said. Back in JFK's time, this is not like saying back in Madison's time, right? This is Washington's time. This is not like 100 years ago. I mean, this isn't that long ago that the cabinet size was significantly smaller. So a president would select their cabinet, and they had maybe, I'm not going to say a handful, because probably more than that. I don't know the specific number, but he's saying like the number has increased, and they're talking about government waste at this particular moment. But the number of people that come into a why? What are we getting out of it? Same question to ask. What are we getting out of all of these cabinet members? Are we getting anything better? Well, it doesn't seem like it. And I mean, you could point to something. You could point and say, well, we got, this bill or this legislation or this regulation. But then we could have this argument on whether or not those things were actually a value add, or they present more as a value add. Like we think they are, but in reality, they didn't actually improve much. And maybe they cost a whole lot, right? So that's the conversation they're having at this moment. But then they dive in specifically to the Department of Education. So I just thought it was interesting to say, hey, look, maybe the cabinet, maybe we should think about having a much smaller cabinet. Like maybe, hopefully, that's something that comes out of this administration, this incoming administration. Let's continue.
For example, and argue that's one that could go. Could you explain why and what you did today to foster the process?
Absolutely. Look, we have actually introduced the legislation that we've been working on for over a year, which is to eliminate the Federal Department of Education, send the vast majority of the decision-making back to the states and the tribes, and also, though, recognizing that there are a number of programs that the Department of Education has that a lot of people feel are very important, such as special education and so forth. But what we've tried to do is to work through all of those different titles and so forth, identify where they were before 1979 when that cabinet position was created, and put them back where they had been in the first place for those that we keep. But then moving forward, recognize that we spent about $16,000 per student per year. And
think about that. $16,000 per student per year. I'm going to do the math on that real quick. So let's see here. Let's just take a look. So, and you're not going to be able to see it on the screen. So $16,000, you're in for 13 years. So times 13, that's $200,000 from K to 12 that we're spending roughly on average. It could be more than that, but $200,000 per student we're spending. And yet we don't have skyrocketing literacy rates that are the envy of the world. Like we're spending $200,000. Like there are kids that go to college and accrue this kind of debt, right? Presumably with the intent of, I'm going to be able to get out in the world and be a very productive member of society. They spend that much just to get themselves into the job market. We're spending that much, and we can't even get great literacy rates. Once you think about that, right? We can't get, I don't remember. I should have looked it up, but I didn't. The number, when you look up and you say, what percentage of students at such and such grade level are on level for math or science, they're never in like the 80s or the 90s. Like they're much lower than that. And we're spending like $200,000. So, the question is, can we spend less and at least get the same results? And the answer, and I've done this in the past, is absolutely we can. It's not money. Money is not the issue. That is not like, and I don't remember which episode it was, but I did an episode on the M Street School, which had like an 80-year period where they were producing quality students. and they were underfunded the entire time. It was a black school back when segregation was acceptable, and when you didn't need the N-word pass because you could just say it, and like that's just the way it was, right? Like we're talking about in a time when things were when the black community was at a disadvantage, and yet you had, and this is not the only school, it just happens to be one of the more notable ones. You had this M Street school, which it didn't have a one, like it's not like they had 1 year where they just happened to have some exceptional students that came through. No, they had an 80 some year period where they consistently outperformed their white counterparts who were better funded. So we know the answer is you don't need that much money. So they're spending $200,000 and we can't even get, 80s or 90s, percentages for the literacy rate or any of the other metrics that we use. Let's continue.
It just hasn't made any difference. In fact, if you take a look at it, most of the scores have gone down. Math has gone up a whole 4 points in 4 decades. So look, there's a better way to do it. Get the bureaucrats out of this thing. They haven't educated a single student, but folks back home have. And so let's put some money back in for the folks back home. Let's put a lot of it into block grants, allow the states to actually make those decisions. And where we can save $1 billion, which is what we think we might be able to save by eliminating the department, that's a good step in the right direction. And at the same time, we get the bureaucrats out of schools in our communities.
All right. I agree. I absolutely agree. Now, I'm not a big fan of the federal money going to the states, which is part of his bill. But if I have to accept federal money going to the states in order to end the Department of Education, then fine. I will take that win for the time being, and then we can continue working toward how do we eliminate, that funding? How do we remove it so that the states are basically fully in control? Now, I know some people might squawk and say, "No, DL, look, if they're gonna save $1 billion a year, then I will take $1 billion savings, even though we're still sending money to the states." Now, the reason it can be still a problem is because a lot of times the federal government, they do this all the time. They will use the money as leverage. They will say things like, they'll do it in a more formal way, but they'll basically say, "Oh, you don't want to implement this policy in your state? Be ashamed if this funding for your highways were to dry up. That'd be tough, huh? I guess you better make this, you better pass this legislation," right? So they use it as leverage, and I don't like that. That's unacceptable. But that's the way it works, right? When somebody's paying you, when basically somebody not paying you, but when somebody's giving you money, they want something in return. No, nobody's giving you money for no reason. If I give you money, I want something out of it. I'm not just gonna be like, "Yeah, here's $1,000 every month to somebody." No. I give you $1,000 a month. You're cutting my lawn. You're doing something. I don't know. Well, you're doing something. Probably more than cutting my lawn for $1,000 a month. But you get the point. So here's an interesting comment here from Keith Garrett. It says, "Unfortunately, a higher price tag does not always mean better quality. It should." That is true. And and you can go online and you can look up like reviews of different products. And sometimes you will find someone says, "Hey, this product over here compared to this product, which is more expensive, this cheaper product actually did as good, or in some cases better." So even in the free-ish market, when we're talking about comparing end products, sometimes a higher price tag is more for the name than it is for anything else. Like you're paying for the name, you're not necessarily paying for higher quality, or there is a point at which you're getting diminishing returns. So like, just to put numbers on it, you could say, "Hey, this item, this lower quality item cost $50, but this higher quality item cost $75. They both basically do the same thing." And you might compare them and you can say, "Well, the higher quality item does do a little bit better." But the real question is, does it do $25 better, right? Again, we're putting numbers on it. And that is the case sometimes. Well, this applies when we're talking about the $16,000 that we're spending per student. Like, what are we getting out of it? At what point are we getting diminishing returns? So even if somebody could point to something and say, well, this is kind of a value add, well, then the question is it a value add to the point of the amount of money that we're putting into this? And I will always circle back to, at the end of the day, what are the literacy rates? What are the rates for, understanding and being able to apply the lessons that you've learned for math, science, anything, So like, to me, that's really the ultimate metric at the end of the day. What are the results of the educate? Because education, learning stuff, being able to tell people about it. When I pick up my son from school, the question that I ask him every single day, what did you learn today? Now he's 5, so it's a little hard to get it out of him because he'll say like nothing. Then I have to go, well, should we not send you to school anymore since you're not learning anything? That's why we send you. Then all of a sudden he remembers. He's like, oh, well, yeah, I learned this actually. So now when he's 15, that may not work. I might like, should we not send you to school? Did you not learn anything? I'm like, you're right, Dad. That's a good idea. So, but I can do that because he's 5. But anyway, point being, Keith is right. Just because you spend more doesn't necessarily you're getting more. And since we're not getting quality now, and we can point to times in history where quality was delivered, that the argument that, hey, we're actually just simply not spending enough in the first place is not an argument. It doesn't work. So let's get into this bill review. Let's just take a look at it. I'm going to go through kind of quickly here. So here's the bill on Congress's website. So it's Senate Bill 5384, Returning Education to Our States Act. So I just want to kind of point out a couple of highlights here. Let's see if we can't zoom in on it a little bit. There we go. And so right now it's in the introduction stage. So you can see that Senator Mike Rounds introduced this on the 21st of last month. It's been read twice. It is so far in the introduced state. Excuse me. And the interesting thing that I wanted to point out here is that yet it does not have any co-sponsors. So maybe if you're interested, excuse me. Okay. I think I got that one. Maybe you call up your senators, and you tell them, hey, I need you to co-sign on this bill. I like this bill. If you like it, right? I mean, if you don't like it, then don't do that. So, but this is where we are. There's not a whole lot going on. It's literally relatively brand new. However, keep in mind that what he said was they had been working on this for a year. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, oh, what, you spent a whole year working on this bill? Like, just to shut down the Department of Education, right? Well, technically, this is Returning Education to Our States Act. So it's actually not just saying, hey, close it, to hell with whatever it does. What it's saying is, all right, let's make some moves. Let's take responsibilities and shift them elsewhere. Maybe some of the, like you said, maybe some of the responsibilities you no longer need to worry about. And maybe on some of them, you actually do worry about it. And you say, all right, here's the provision that we make for them. And that's what he did. So let's see. Let's take a look at the bill. There we are. All right. So here's the bill. It is 7 pages. Now, normally I would be like, kind of like cringing, right? Like you're closing down a department. How many pages do you really need? But I actually like this because, as he kind of alluded to in his conversation, he said, some people think that there are certain elements of the Department of Education, certain responsibilities that are still a value add. So what we're going to do is, and what he said was, they're going to shift the responsibilities of those elsewhere, if they need to be kept. And then other things, you just simply say, yeah, we're going to get rid of that. And so I'm like, okay, this is a nice start, because I get it. The Department of Education is not doing nothing. It's just not delivering the results that we want. But it's not that they're not doing anything. They're doing something, but doing something in itself is not a value add. We have to identify, what are you doing? Is that bringing value? That's how we need to approach this. And the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of things that it's doing that I would argue are not bringing value, and so they can just stop doing those things. You don't even need to shift the responsibility. Now, I would probably argue pretty much most everything, but other people differ. And again, I'm okay with taking a win where I can take it. All right. So it says the act may be cited as the Returning Education to Our States Act. Cool. Effective on the date, that is 180 days after the date of enactment of this act, the Department of Education is abolished. And with the exception of the programs transferred under Section 3, any program for which the Secretary of Education or the Department of Education has administrative responsibility as provided by law or by delegation of authority pursuant to law is repealed, including each program under the following: the Department of Education Organization Act, the General Education Provisions Act. So this is what I like about it already. He's starting out, it's like, look, we're going to transfer some of the responsibilities. Anything that's not transferred, repealed, including these. So when you want to remove or get rid of the department, any department for that matter, you have to go through and you have to look and say, what are all the responsibilities? What other laws are in place that we're going to have to deal with? That's Congress's job. So it sounds to me, now I don't know everything that the Department of Education does. I don't necessarily know all the laws that are in place that Congress has to deal with. But it sounds to me like Senator Rounds is taking that into consideration. And so it's a bill that is considering all of these things so that later when somebody comes in, if somebody votes against this, hopefully, if it comes to a vote, not everything comes to a vote, but if it comes to a vote, hopefully anybody that votes against it will not be able to say, well, I voted no because this bill doesn't acknowledge this thing over here, right? It totally just ignores it, pretends like, and we cannot pass this bill without addressing this thing. It reads to me, without knowledge, that it is addressing everything. We're gonna transfer some stuff. We're gonna repeal everything else, and then including any program under these acts that were passed by Congress, because the Department of Education Organization Act, the General Education Provisions Act, those were passed by Congress. So those are in effect right now. They have to be addressed. That's why I actually don't mind this bill being 7 pages. And we're not gonna read all through it. And then it says, look, 180 days, very specific time frame, right? 6 months. That's awesome. I like it. I like time frames because now, like, if they pass this bill, then in 180 days, we can say, what's going on? Why is it not shut down? Or we can celebrate, pop out the champagne and say, hey, shut down. Awesome. So we'll go through here. We're just going to kind of skim through. So in here, it says, transfer of certain Department of Education programs. So it actually identifies some of the programs that they want to transfer. Okay. So I'm just going to read a couple of them. All functions, programs, and authorities of the Secretary of Education under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, like you mentioned, shall be transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services. So if you're concerned about the Disabilities Education Act and what it provides, well, it's not going away. They're just going to shift the responsibilities and say, okay, it's no longer now under the authority and the purview of the Department of Education. It's now going to be under the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, we can argue and say whether or not that's appropriate, but the reality is it was unlikely ever to get Congress to just in one fell swoop say, we're dissolving the Department of Education and everything it does is going to be repealed. Like, that was probably never going to happen because you would have to get, basically 535 members of Congress on board with that, or at least the majority of them, And that would be a very difficult task because somebody somewhere would get to one of those Congress members and say, hey, you can't vote for this because this is super important and we'll make, we'll make life rough for you if you vote for it. So the likelihood of that happening was very low. This is actually much more likely to happen. Let's see. Each authority and program of the Office of Indian Education of the Department of Education shall be transferred to the Department of the Interior. So they're actually spreading these out to different departments. And they're saying, all right, well, and I don't know whether or not these are appropriate. I didn't look into that, but I think this is a good start. This is a good bill to at least get the conversation going and kind of prime Congress and say, it is time to dissolve this Department of Education with the explicit intention of reducing bureaucracy, reducing spending, those two things. And we can measure those because if you repeal certain acts, like if you don't repeal any acts, then all you've done is just shuffle things around. You played musical chairs without removing a chair. But if you actually say, this is repealed, then you have reduced the bureaucracy in Washington. So we can measure that. We can measure how much were you spending on these particular programs, and the ones that are repealed, now you're no longer spending that money on those. Now they could shift the money to somewhere else and they would still be spending it. But again, if they can say, this is how much we were spending, this is how much we no longer spent, we actually have this money here. And, maybe it went to, it's never going to go back to the taxpayers. Like this, let's be honest. The only way you're getting money back is to not have it taken in the first place. Okay. But we can still measure these. We can, and that's what we're looking for. Measure. If we cannot count it, it does not count. Think of it that way. Okay. If we can't count it, it doesn't count. I'm not interested in, people feel better. It's kind of like when they rename a school and they're like, well, we're going to rename this school because it was named after, a KKK member from way back in the day. And we're going to rename it because, people of color feel bad and can't get a good education. Okay. Well, I want to measure that. What's the measurement? I want to measure before and I want to measure after, because that's how I know that something was effective. And if you can't count it, right? If you can't measure, if you can't count it, it don't count, period. You can quote me on that. All right, let's go on. So there's a bunch more. We're not going to read through all of them. I just wanted to, but I do want to show you on the screen, like they're going through and they said, all right, this bill or this act is going to be, the responsibilities afforded or set up under this act are being transferred here, being transferred there, right? Then they get down to Section 4, block grants to states. It's not my favorite part. Again, in general, the Secretary of the Treasury shall carry out a program under the Secretary, under which the Secretary makes allocations to states to support elementary and secondary education, including career and technical education. Now, again, I don't believe that this is the responsibility of the federal government to worry about this, much less to spend money on it. But this is where we are. And this is what they're presenting that we can get. The allocations made by the Secretary of Treasury to each state under this subsection for a fiscal year shall be in an amount that bears the same relationship to the amount appropriated to carry out this subsection for the fiscal year as the number of students in kindergarten through grade 12 who were enrolled in public, private, and home schools in the state for the previous fiscal year bears to the number of such students in all the states of the previous. So it reads to me like they're basically saying, whatever you were spending on students before, that's what you're spending on them now. Okay, fine. If we're just going to say the money that we're appropriating to the states is the same amount of money that we were that we were dedicating prior at the federal level, okay, fine. I'm okay with that because again, it's taking money from the administrative state and it technically is giving it to a smaller administrative state. But the closer that you get to the school, the more likely that money will actually have some impact. And the states will know better how to use that money, because what's going on in Florida is going to be different than what's going on in, say, North Dakota. They're going to have entirely different needs because they've got different situation, right? We might have more, like, for instance, in Miami, we have a higher population of immigrants where maybe we deem it necessary to manage a second language. Whereas in North Dakota, presumably, they don't have a large population of people that speak a second language. So maybe they don't need to take funding and say, let's manage this funding so that we can assist our students who are bilingual, right? Like, or maybe, maybe some students who don't speak English very well and they need to set up an ESL, English as a second language program, right? But they're going to have different needs, and there's a wide range of different needs that cities and states are going to have. And so that's the best place, is to go directly to the source. That's who knows best. All right. Use of funds. A state that receives an allocation under this subsection shall use such funding for any purpose relating to early childhood, elementary, or secondary education. Okay, great. Now they're saying, like, look, if you get money that's earmarked effectively, that's designated for education, you have to use it for education. You can't use it for something else. Okay, fair enough. I mean, if we're giving money to somebody then for a purpose, then it has to be explicitly clear that's the purpose. You don't get to use it for something else. Post-secondary education state block grant program. So in general, the Secretary of the Treasury shall carry out a program under which the Secretary makes allocations to states to support post-secondary education. The allocations made by the Secretary of Treasury to each state under this subsection for a fiscal year shall be an amount, blah, 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 blah. Same thing, but instead of elementary school, now they're talking about what was it? Post-secondary secondary education, right? Post-secondary education. Sorry. So they're just basically making allocations and saying, all right, here is this allocation that we're providing with this money. Here is how it needs to be spent. And so then they get some conditions here, right? As a condition of receiving a block grant under this subsection, a state shall provide the Secretary of Treasury with an assurance that the state will carry out each of the following: submitting student data to the Secretary of Treasury annually as requested, blah, blah, blah. I'm okay with this, even though I actually don't want the federal government having any more information that it absolutely has to have, which is virtually no information about me or my child or you or your child, right? However, again, when you're giving out money, you get something in return. And one of the most important things to get in return is information that says we are spending this money on what you expect us to spend it on. That's what you should get. And that's what they want. Makes sense. Okay. They got tongue-tied there. Completing of annual audits, right? That conform to generally accepted accounting principles, blah, blah, blah. So they want audits. They want you to comply with applicable federal civil rights laws. Okay, I get it. You're getting federal money. There are certain strings that are attached, including, hey, you have to follow these laws, these federal. That's part of it. But again, this is a good step. It's a good step forward. Misused or misappropriated funds. If the Secretary of Treasury finds that any funds under this section have been misused or misappropriated by the state, the Secretary of Treasury may require repayment of the misused funds and withhold federal funds under this section for the next fiscal year, may reach a voluntary resolution agreement with that state. Okay. If you sneak and spend the money where you shouldn't, you pay it back. I'm good with that. Absolutely. Like, we need that kind of accountability. I mean, again, this is under the pretense of, if we're giving money out, this should happen, right? Again, I'm not in favor of the if we're giving money part, but that's where we are. So therefore, we need to build in assurances that the money that's being stolen from taxpayers and used for something is used for that something. Like, that's like it, first and foremost, you're taking money from me and you're telling me I'm taking this money so that we can provide education in this country, then damn it, I want to see education. I mean, this, like, you know, at a minute, I would prefer you not take my money in the first place. And I'll keep arguing on that note. But in the meantime, you damn well better use it for what you say you're going to use it for. And you better give me some results. And we as Americans, we should yell and scream when we're not getting those results or when we see money being misused or used for some other purpose. Then it gets into some definitions. We're going to skip all the definitions. Civil rights laws. So they address that. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice shall be responsible for receiving complaints and otherwise enforcing and carrying out federal civil rights laws that are applicable to grant programs under Section 4 and the programs described in paragraphs 4 through 7 of Section 3, right? So they're basically like, look, you're getting money from us. You have to abide by the civil rights laws. Makes sense. Not much of an argument there. Now, if you want to argue about whether or not the civil rights laws should be repealed, there's arguments to be had about that. That's an entirely different conversation. But as long as they're there, we have to address them. That's what this bill does. This bill addresses them. All right. So let's see. And that's the end of it. So that's my bill review. Like, as far as bills go, this is a decent bill. And again, I'm considering the fact that we absolutely should not be taking money from citizens for mass education, for public education. That should not be a thing. But while it is a thing, let's start chipping away and saying, all right, if that's what you're going to do, then you might as well at least make it efficient. And I'm good with that. So there we are. Let's check on some comments here. Any other comments that I should address? Let's put this up on the screen. It's interesting that in Seinfeld, on the last episodes, the group that got in trouble for watching a carjacking and not intervening, Good Samaritan rule, now in New York, they don't want you to do that. That's going back to the beginning of the show. Sorry, I missed that earlier. And where I was talking about, like, highlighting people that do good things. We do need to highlight people that do good things in life. And not because, again, that they're black, but if that's your concern, that one group doesn't recognize the value of another group, then maybe that group that you want to be valued more, you present stories that people can get behind. And then that also promotes people doing good deeds. We should want a society where somebody's willing to climb 19 stories to help their mom. Because if they're willing to climb 19 stories to help their mom, what might they be willing to do to help out their neighbor? Right? That's pretty dramatic. And I don't think that necessarily everybody has to start climbing buildings to save people out of fires. But it would be nice if somebody's car breaks down, that they can guarantee within a couple of minutes somebody's stopping to help them. Right? If you see your neighbor, something happened to your neighbor, you rush over and you help them. Right? Like, I want to live in a society where we can count on a good Samaritan to literally be around the corner, because we have valued them such to the point that people want to be a good Samaritan. So absolutely. I was never a big Seinfeld fan, but I agree with the sentiment there. All right, let's see. What else do we got? I think that is all that we've got. Yes, going back to the bill review, I'm bouncing around a bit here. Keith Garrett says progress, not perfection, but progress can be measured and has accountability. 100%, Keith. Absolutely. We want to make progress, but we need to have accountability. And I'm in progress. Again, I'm going to say it one more time. If you can't count it, it doesn't count. That's rigid and tough, but it's how we're going to get the accountability out of government. So keep that in your head. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode, found it informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me on Dad Talk. Dad Talk is my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No arguments, no debates. Dads choose the topic, It's just my way of raising dad voices. So if you know a dad or you are a dad and you want them to be on the show or you want to be on the show, go ahead and reach out. Let me know. We will make that happen. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel or my Rumble channel. If you prefer, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.